Oh, the beaver plaque's gone. I wonder what happened to it. There used to be a beautiful beaver. Well, today I want to take you guys to one of my favorite spots in Delaware County. It's called the Great Minquas Path. I'll be back with you in a minute. Well, hello. So I am right now walking on the Great Minquas Path in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. This is near where I grew up, and it's one of my favorite places. It's hidden away in the suburbs, in a town called Rose Valley. And this path was one of the main trading routes that the Indians used, or that the Swedes and the Dutch used when they colonized this area. This path has existed for potentially thousands of years. This is one of the oldest roads in America. Now, when the Dutch and the Swedes settled this area, the Swedes settled on the banks of the Delaware, and they came up the creeks and found this path. And this path became one of the major trading routes between the Delaware Indians. At that time, they were known as the Lenape, later renamed to the Conostogans, and they were the Susquehannock tribe. The Susquehannock tribe is who became the Conostogans, I believe. So anyway, the Susquehannock tribes would come into Philly to meet with the governor. Traders would use this path to bring beaver pelts and other trade goods out to Lancaster. William Penn himself walked up or went up this path to get out to the Lancaster area when he needed to. So right now I'm walking downhill, and you can see below me is the creek. And I wanted to bring you out here because it's one of the most special places to me. It really is hard to find. You have to know where it is, and it's tucked away in the suburbs. Earlier I showed you the plaque and the sign. There used to be a plaque on that wall. I don't know what happened to it. I fully expected it to be there. I'm surprised it's gone. It was a beautiful old plaque with a beaver on it to signify the beaver pelts that traders would bring down this path and go out to past Swarthmore, past Rutledge, or what was Morton, past Morton, and then out to Darby and over Darby Creek. There was a fort on Darby Creek and another fort near where is now the airport. And those were the main places where people brought their goods down this path across Delaware County, across Darby Creek to Philadelphia and those early forts to trade. And it's very special. I like coming here because this area reminds me that we truly live in an ancient landscape. And I think in America, the ancient landscape has often been paved over. In the hills surrounding me are all sorts of modern developments with new houses and green lawns and full of non-native plants, usually. Rocks have been blown up. Hills have been leveled and smoothed out. So the landscape has changed. But there are little pockets of the ancient landscape that have been preserved, such as this area. And this small little path, I just walked down it. This is it, and I'll turn the camera you can see I'm now at the bottom of that hill I came down. And it opens up into this this bottom area where there's sort of a curve. The creek comes around this bend and curves here, and then goes out down there. And this bottom area would have been a perfect stopping place in ancient times. It would have been perfect to take a break after you're coming down the hill. Now it is surrounded. You can see, I don't know if you can see, but up there is the ridge line. You can just see it through the trees. Maybe you can see houses up there. This would have also been a good place for an ambush. So no doubt, these hills would have been protected by scouts. People, maybe Indians and traders, they would have made camp down here along the banks of the river, and then in the morning, or whenever they were to continue after making camp, they would have crossed somewhere around the bend over there, where the path meets the water. I believe that's where they would have gone. You can see the ridge line comes down, and it flattens out briefly over there, and you can kind of scoot through with, it would have, we're talking about people with entourages. Like William Penn, when he came through here, he would have had maybe 30 or 40 people with him. They would have had supplies for many days. They would have had oxen and horses, and his entourage would have passed through here with a lot of supplies. Now later, one of the early houses that was built in this area was actually built up on this ridge. I believe there was a big mansion that was built there in maybe the 16 or 1700s. Once the settlers really colonized this place completely and pushed the Indians out, maybe 100 or 200 years later. I don't know the exact date, I should know that, but a while later, someone built a house up there on that hill overlooking this area. So I believe there's still you can still see some foundations, or I think there might even be an old fireplace up there. But when I was a kid, I used to love coming here. I've been in this area many times. There's a place called the Old Mill, which is just down. It's just out of sight. You can't quite see. I don't think you can quite see it from this angle. But the Old Mill is a very important place. When I have a cousin who got married there. When I was in high school, I used to come here when I would skip school. One time I came down to this area. It's a very nice area because it's so hidden away and it's hard to find. Now I've also spent a lot of time looking on the banks of this creek for arrowheads and artifacts from colonial times. I've never found any. Presumably because they've all been washed away, or maybe I just didn't know what I was looking for, right? I suspect I just didn't know what I was looking for, or that the various floods throughout history have churned the rocks around, so everything's been destroyed or washed away. Now you can see I'm walking through a little ditch here, and that's because this creek has changed course many times over history, and it has sometimes come through this area instead. And so I also suspect that one of the reasons I didn't find many artifacts when I looked here is that I'm not looking at the ancient creek bed, or the right area, because the creek has shifted, right? So maybe if I were to look up here or on the banks, along this area, maybe I would find more artifacts. But that's also not what I want to do, because I don't want to disturb this area. This is a natural preserve. and I don't want to ruin it for other people. So I don't want to dig, and I don't think anybody else should be digging. That being said, there are some interesting spots where you can see things. For instance, let's see, how do I get down here? In Victorian times, and later, or earlier, I don't know exactly when, the families of local families would come down here to picnic, and they would come down to this riverbank, and they'd sort of set up sometimes down here or up here on the ridge, and they'd bathe. And there was also a crossing somewhere around here because it's very shallow. And there would have been there was an old cabin on that side of the creek at one point. I believe you can still see some of the ruins of a cabin further down. And in the creek, you can often find some clay pottery or old broken chinaware from the people who used to bathe here. The settlers used to spend their picnic here, and you can find they used to just throw their when something would break, they'd leave it here. And so you can find china, you can find bottles, all sorts of things. So I'm going to take a quick look, and if I find something, I'll share it. I'm going to go down there, figure out how to jump down and see if I can find an example of some of the pottery and chinaware that you can find in the creeks around here. Because this isn't the only spot you can find them. In all the creeks or in Delaware County, you can, if you know where to look, you can find pieces of old china. So let me go do that, and I'll get back to you in a bit. Okay, bye. Okay, let's see. There it is. I think this is more modern glass. I don't think this is older glass. Oh, but look at the nice patterning on there. That's beautiful. I'll put it back. And look at this huge chunk of quartz. Really a beautiful chunk of quartz, and it's translucent. Let me see if I can hold it up to the sun. That's beautiful. Yep. Okay, now this might be ice. Let's see. I think... it's glass. And it's very smooth. I mean, look at those edges there. So it's been in the water for a while. Now I think it might be modern. I don't think this is too old, but someone who knows more about glass can tell me. That's a good little chunk. Oh, and then look at this. Here's another chunk of glass. Again, it looks modern. So, let's see. This is an interesting piece of... There are all sorts of like pieces of coal and slag and little things, little chunks of rock that were probably used in the mills. This might have fed a furnace on this creek at some point. And then, of course, there are all these tiny little bits of brick. Like, look at this. This is a little chunk of brick from an old brick that would have been used to build something along this. Oh, look. What's that? Oh, yeah. It's another chunk of that white glass. So, there are signs here. I'll see if I can find a bigger brick. I've seen bricks here in the past that were pretty cool. The problem is, as you can see, there's still snow and ice. So I think it'll be hard to find a lot of the artifacts that are probably under there. But I'll look around a little longer, and then if I find anything, I'll get back to you. Now, one thing I'm finding a lot of are these huge chunks of slag. Look at this. This is a huge chunk of slag from some sort of smelting. There were lots of furnaces and mills and various, there was a lot, yeah, like furnaces for making iron and steel on these creeks, and so the creeks are full of these chunks of slag. Look at how beautiful that is. I mean, this is obviously pollution technically and should be removed maybe, but this is a particularly big piece. I don't usually see chunks of slag like that. So yeah, it's part of the history of the creek, so we'll leave it where we found it. Okay, I didn't find any more any of the sort of nice fine china that I've seen down here in the past. These creeks are full of them, so maybe if we come back in the spring when there isn't so much snow and ice and leaves everywhere, dead grass and whatnot, maybe when it's easier to see the ground, I'll be able to find more interesting pieces of the past to show you. But it's always nice to come here. You know, I would say this is one of my happy places in life. And yeah, I think when I come here, I always connect with the past. As I said earlier, this is an ancient landscape, and you can really feel oh, look, there's a beautiful bird. Let's see if I can. Do you see the finch on that branch? There he goes. Yeah, this area is very full of meaning. You know, so many lives have been lived here. Presumably people have died here on this trading route. You know, back in the pioneer days, this would have been one of the places that at some point was a frontier zone. This creek, Ridley Creek, I don't know much about this specific spot, but I do know that as the Swedes and then the Dutch and then later the Quakers colonized this area, they progressively pushed the Indians back creek by creek by creek, starting with Darby. You know, they landed on the Delaware and the Schuylkill, and then Darby Creek, and then presumably, I guess Crum Creek, and then Ridley Creek, and then all the way out to Brandywine Creek, and then all the way out to the Susquehanna River. So that's how this place was colonized. And when I come here, I remember the people that have lived in this area for thousands of years. And I think it's something that Americans don't spend enough time remembering. There are so many ancient places like this that we don't really focus on because we're enamored more of our colonial history than pre-colonial history. I think that's something that becomes more apparent when you live abroad. You know, I lived in Europe for a little while, and they are so fascinated with their ancient history. It got me even interested. You know, they have dolmens from like 10,000 years ago scattered across the landscape, old burial mounds, and you know, all sorts of megalithic structures that have been there for eons. And they've preserved them, or somehow those things have survived. That's probably more accurate than they were preserved. Nowadays, a lot of them are preserved, hopefully. But here in America, we don't have as much. I think there's been a lot of destruction of ancient sites in America. For instance, not many people know about Cahokia. I'll do a whole nother video on that. But there's an old city, the first city, arguably, in the Americas is thousands of years old, and it's outside St. Louis. It's called Cahokia, and there's a huge pyramid. People don't know about this stuff. So I try to focus on those things when I come here. The fact that we are walking in the footsteps of the ancients. Ancient people used to live here, and that's magical to me. I really appreciate. And if the ancestors are listening, I thank them for allowing me to walk in their footsteps and enjoy this place. And I just appreciate. Wow, look at this view. Hold on, look at this. I don't know if you can really see how beautiful that is. But the path, the old trading path, kind of goes up through the woods and then up that ridge. And so you can imagine wagon trains coming down this ridge through the woods, down here, and then out to the point and around the corner to where they would have crossed. So yeah, thanks for coming along on this adventure, and I'll do more of these sorts of places in the woods. Yeah, I guess one last thing I'll show you now that it's visible is way up there. You can see there's a brick structure, like right where the tip of my finger is, right in there. It's hard to see, but that, ladies and gentlemen, is an old fireplace from the mansion that used to be up on that hill. There used to be a big house right there, and that's all that's left. So yeah, happy Sunday. Thanks for coming on this afternoon walk. And oh, look at this. Look at this. Now I wonder, what do you think this is? What do you think MQ means? I bet MQ means Miquas, Minquas, Miquas Path. And then on this side there's LP. So I don't know what these trails mean, but that's pretty cool. I'm glad that these trails are here. Maybe I'll figure it out and share it, but yeah. Okay, I think I'll leave it there. And in the future, I'll do more places like this that I travel to, because I think they're very important. And as Americans, we need to remember the people that lived here before us and who came before our people came.